O Allah, if I worship you out of fear of your hellfire, burn me in it. If I worship you hoping for your paradise, keep it from me. But if I worship you for you alone, then do not withhold your eternal beauty from me. These words were not written by a scholar in a palace. They were not spoken by a caliph or a man of high lineage. They were spoken by a woman, in the silence of a desert night, who had nothing to offer God except a heart completely on fire with love. Her name was Rabia al-Adawiyya. And today, on Ru in History, we journey back to 8th century Basra to meet the woman who may have changed the soul of Islam forever. The year is around 717 CE. The Umayyad Caliphate is in its final decades, and the world of Islam is expanding, east into Persia, west across North Africa. Trade routes hum, armies march, empires are being built. But in the city of Basra, in what is today southern Iraq, something quieter is also being born. Scholars and ascetics are beginning to ask a question that no sword could answer. What does it mean to truly know God? This movement, this turning inward, would eventually be called tasawwuf, what the West would call Sufism. And it was still young, still fragile, still finding its language. Into this world, a world of wealth and poverty, of conquests and contemplation, a girl was born. She was the fourth daughter of a poor family. Her father named her Rabia, the fourth. He could not know she would become the first. When her parents died, she was still a child. Rabia and her sisters were separated in the chaos of famine and hardship. And Rabia was sold into slavery. She worked for her master by day, exhausting, endless labor. But at night, when the world went silent, Rabia came alive. Night after night, she would stand, tired, aching, and she would pray. Not out of duty, not out of fear. She prayed the way a person in love writes letters they never send, just to speak, just to be heard, just to be near. One night, her master awoke to a strange light. He followed it to where Rabia knelt in prayer, and witnesses of his account describe a luminous glow surrounding her, as if the very air around her had softened. He was shaken to his core. The next morning, he called Rabia to him, and he freed her. Just like that. He said he felt ashamed to keep in chains someone so clearly in communion with the divine. Rabia did not rush to the city. She did not seek comfort or marriage or status. She went to the desert. She built a small hut. And she continued, just as she had in slavery, to pray through every night until the call to far. People began to come to her, first out of curiosity, then out of need, then out of reverence. Scholars, judges, governors, men who had memorized the Quran, men who had fought in battles, men of great reputation, would sit before this freed woman in her desert hut and ask her to teach them about God. And she would teach them, not with fear, not with rules, but with love. Here is where Rabia becomes not just a historical figure, but a theological revolution. Before Rabia, the dominant spiritual framework in early Islamic thought was one of fear and hope. You worship God because you fear his punishment. You worship God because you hope for his reward. Paradise, hell, the scales, the accounting, these are real and important. But Rabia said, what if that is not enough? What if love that is purchased by reward is not love at all? She famously carried 2 vessels through the streets of Basra, one filled with water, one filled with fire. When people stopped and asked her what she was doing, she said, I want to pour water on the fires of hell and set flame to paradise, so that both veils are lifted and people worship Allah for Allah alone. This concept, mahabba, divine love not motivated by gain or fear, became the cornerstone of Sufi thought. She did not reject the Sharia. She did not deny paradise or hell. She simply said, for me, he is enough. She was also asked, repeatedly, why she never married. She replied that she was too preoccupied with the beloved to give her heart to anyone else. Some scholars interpret this as metaphor. Others take it as the most literal truth. What she gave the Islamic tradition was permission to speak to God not only as a subject to a king, but as a soul to its source. She wept often in her prayers, not from sadness, but from an overwhelming nearness. She once said, my hope is in you. My heart is at rest with you. When I remember you, all grief leaves me. Rabia al-Adawiyya passed from this world around 801 CE, in Jerusalem. In the city, she had made her final home. She was buried simply, as she had lived simply. But she did not leave simply. Her ideas traveled. They reached Persia, where a poet named Rumi would one day write of nothing but divine love in some of the most beautiful verses ever composed. They reached Andalusia, where Ibn Arabi would build entire metaphysical architectures on the foundation of love as the highest knowledge. Every Sufi who ever said, I love God, not as a transaction, but as a truth, is, in some way, continuing her sentence. 1,300 years later, her prayer is still recited, still debated, still felt. And perhaps that is the most Sufi lesson of all, that a woman who owned almost nothing, who spent decades in slavery, who lived in a desert hut, left behind something that empires, with all their armies and gold, could not. She left behind a language for the soul. This has been ruined history. If this story moved something in you, share it with someone whose heart needs it today. Subscribe, leave a comment. Tell me, what do you love without condition? Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.